Star Trek, the Kobayashi Maru. Historians note, this adventure takes place shortly after the events chronicled in Star Trek, the motion picture. Chapter 1, Halley. This is Enterprise, hailing shuttlecraft Halley. All frequencies are open to you, Halley, and locating circuits are in operation. If you are able, please respond. This is Enterprise, hailing ship shuttle Halley. All frequencies are open to you.
Chekhov, can't you turn that blasted thing off?
Leonard McCoy's voice was uncharacteristically low, but cut clearly through Uhura's tinny broadcast over the shuttle radio. In the row of seats across from McCoy, James Kirk opened his eyes to darkness. For a long moment, Captain James T. Kirk was aware of little, save that he was hurt and he was cold. Then the pain took residence somewhere deep in his right knee, and memory came awake with the pain. The remembering made him vaguely sick. He gingerly turned his head, searching the dark shuttle for Scott and Sulu, now that the doctor had roused him. Leonard McCoy occupied the seat just across the shuttle's main aisle from Kirk. One row ahead of where Sulu, propped carefully upright, still slept. The doctor had been in almost the same position when Kirk, drowsy from McCoy's pain medication, slipped into sleep God knew how long ago. McCoy was bundled into a field jacket, nearly a size and a half too large, his hands stuffed sullenly under his arms for warmth. The hard yellow light from an emergency lamp painted his face in bright relief against the cold darkness around him. He hadn't yet realized Kirk was awake. McCoy's attention was fixed on the forward hatch, where Kirk could hear movement, but where the dark was too deep to see.
Chekhov,
McCoy hissed again.
Turn off the radio.
I heard you, Chekhov called back, sounding more than just mildly annoyed. There was a long pause and a muted snap slide as the Russian pulled one of the radio's circuit boards. The shuttle fell into dismal silence. Don't go getting grouchy on me, Bones, Kirk advised McCoy. The quarters are cramped enough as it is. The doctor turned to him, startled.
How long have you been awake?
He asked, avoiding a reply to Kirk's gentle reprimand. The captain shrugged. Long enough to hear you snap at my navigator. McCoy looked embarrassed and settled back into his seat a bit self-consciously.
Sorry, Jim, it's just...
The doctor's ill temper seemed to bleed away with his weary sigh. He didn't look angry then, only tired and old.
It just seems so pointless, he finished. That's all.
I know. Kirk's words puffed out clouds of white vapor. The shuttle had been losing heat for over an hour now. But don't give up hope yet, Bones. McCoy managed a huh. It sounded so much like his normal crusty self, Kirk had to smile.
How's your knee?
You're the doctor, Kirk replied. Aren't I supposed to ask you that? McCoy favored the captain with an unamused scowl.
You haven't done anything that won't heal, but you'll have to be careful with it for at least a couple weeks. You managed to wrench it pretty good.
Kirk didn't like how that sounded. If nothing else, it meant no movement right now. Wrench it? He echoed, striving for lightness, and he suspected failing. If you keep using these technical terms, Bones, you're going to confuse me.
Don't worry about the technical terms, McCoy tossed back. Just tell me if it hurts.
Kirk shrugged again. A little. In truth, the knee was a solid, steady fist of pain, cramping his thigh muscles until the urge to shift position became almost unbearable. Every time he stirred, though, the joint exploded in violent protest and left him wishing he'd never tried to move at all. But if McCoy could change his subject, so could he. How's Sulu holding up? Worry flashed across the doctor's face, but before he could answer, the helmsman volunteered. I've been better. McCoy turned in his seat to glare at Sulu.
You're supposed to be asleep, Commander,
he reprimanded sternly. Eyes still closed, Sulu grinned weakly at McCoy over the cervical support, holding his head in place.
You've got to be kidding, Doc. My shoulder's killing me. I've got you on a high dosage already, McCoy said, his manner softened. I don't want to give you anything more just yet.
Kirk thought maybe Sulu tried to nod. The only indication was the tight expression of pain that flitted across the lieutenant commander's face. The helmsman was strapped and belted so firmly into his seat, Kirk was surprised he could move at all. "That's okay, Doc," Sulu said. Even his normally brilliant smile looked only pained and drugged. "I don't want you to OD me, but I'm not sleeping either." Kirk sank back into his seat and tried not to think about his crew or his knee. Neither task was easy. The stale air in the shuttle smelled rankly of burnt circuitry and ozone. Enigmatic sounds and smells wafted into the main compartment from Scott's repair efforts in the rear hatch. In the pilot's hatch, Chekhov hadn't so much as cursed as he sifted through the remains of the radio in search of something to repair. At first, Uhura's soothing velvet voice over their receiver was the only indication that home was still out there somewhere, looking for them. Now, even that ephemeral reassurance was gone. Kirk didn't know whether to be angry at McCoy or grateful.
"We were supposed to go on shore leave in 3 days.
Their first shore leave in 4 months. Just wasn't fair. The Enterprise wasn't even assigned near the Hoenn system. Then, just 2 weeks ago, contact with the Van Katzen research group was completely lost, and the Enterprise was the only ship in a position to attempt an investigation and recovery. Again. Failure was a chance the Van Katzen group and their funders had taken when the group was first placed on Hoenn 7. The safest planet in an utterly unsafe system, Hoenn 7 came fully equipped with all the dangers expected in such an arrangement. Hoenn's 47 planets, natural, captured, and rogue, careened about an unstable tertiary sun, creating, destroying, and slinging as incredible an array of astrophysical anomalies as Kirk had ever had the honor to see. Primarily, the group was there to delve into the secrets of gravitational attraction and repulsion, hoping to better equip modern sensor systems so travelers might discover and avoid gravitic anomalies rather than stumble into them.
"So much for modern research," Kirk reflected glumly. "We've probably got more information on gravitic fluxes than Van Katzen has compiled in a year."
Only they would probably never get home with the data. One of the unfortunate hazards of the system were several debris clouds and asteroid belts, the remains of the system's more unstable planets and comets. Hoenn 7 spent most of its solar year in the path of one or more of these. Besides the obvious danger of collision, the iron and nickel-rich asteroids wreaked havoc with sensors. Upon arriving, Kirk deemed it unnecessary to venture too close to Hoenn 7 with something as large as a starship. The Enterprise was left in parking orbit just beyond the path of the debris cloud enveloping Hoenn 7, and a team was dispatched by shuttlecraft to make contact with Van Katzen and report. Kirk headed the team himself, desperate to be away from the bridge, even if only for a little while, and anxious to have someone of his own tactical skill and diplomacy along. The other 5 positions were left open to volunteers. On later reflection, Kirk realized that even if he'd handpicked each member of the shuttle's crew, the results would have been the same. He wasn't sure if he should feel guilty about that, but he did. Kirk wanted an engineer, in the event some mechanical problem caused the Van Katzen group's silence. Chief Engineer Montgomery Scott pointed out that the equipment of Hoenn 7 would not be standard, and Kirk would need a top engineer to discern its workings and repairs. When the tally was in, Kirk couldn't argue with Scott's choice for the assignment himself. The captain had seen Scott puzzle out and repair things Kirk couldn't even recognize as machinery, as well as resurrect equipment other engineers had declared utterly unsalvageable. It sometimes seemed at least half the Enterprise's current engine room was as the designer planned it, the other half Scotty rigged to do whatever Kirk asked. If the engineer wanted to come play with archaic scientific equipment in the middle of a messed-up star system, who was Kirk to tell him no? Dr. McCoy didn't offer any explanation for his willingness to tag along, and Kirk didn't ask. The captain suspected the doctor was growing bored with the number of stress-related problems caused by their long stint without shore leave. The Van Katzen rescue was just an excuse to leave the ship in some other doctor's capable hands. Whatever the reason, Kirk harassed McCoy only moderately for his sudden desire to flirt with danger, and suddenly welcomed his company. Pavel Chekhov's reasons for volunteering were easily the most obvious. Kirk's former navigator, now chief of ship security, hadn't been the only member of the Enterprise's security force to volunteer for the mission. Every crewman in security knew as well as Kirk that it was standard procedure to include at least one armed escort on any investigative team. Rank and position mattered very little in the field. Kirk knew, too, that their recent wealth of deep space runs had provided security with no off-ship time at all, and very few on-ship duties besides trading off at the bridge weapons station. In the end, Kirk looked on in amusement while, at First Officer Spock's suggestion, the 15 security personnel drew lots for the contested assignment. Kirk always considered it unfortunate that Chekhov had been transferred away from navigations. He was by far the best navigator Kirk had ever had. So it was to the captain's advantage that Chekhov won the draw. Kirk assigned the lieutenant as both shuttle navigator and team security escort, thus cutting the team's numbers by 1. Lieutenant Commander Sulu was the easiest inclusion of all. Sulu was Kirk's chief helmsman and the best pilot on the ship, not to mention in Starfleet. Kirk planned to privately ask the small, slender Asian to join the flight. He suspected Sulu could be talked into it, if only to ensure the safety of the others. To his distinct pleasure, however, Kirk never got the chance. Sulu showed up, as cheerful as if he'd been reporting for a routine practice simulation, while Chekhov was still compiling navigational data from the Enterprise's main computer. Within 5 minutes, it was impossible to tell the two men hadn't worked side by side in several years. "It's like riding a bike," Sulu informed Kirk brightly, obviously aiming the jibe at Chekhov. "You never really forget. Besides, I'll make sure he doesn't run us into anything important." As if to prove Sulu's teasing groundless, Chekhov reported ready for launch in record time, and they moved the shuttle smoothly into free space. Halley nosed into the crazy system uneventfully. Scott rode the sensors as if they were a nervous horse, quietly calling off coordinates when the readings warned him of danger. Sulu's skilled and delicate hands laced the tiny shuttle through conflicting gravity wells and any number of tangled lines of force, as calm and unhurried as the plants that shared his cabin back on board the ship. Chekhov kept his eyes trained on his own panel, acting on Scott's information as smoothly as Sulu, though less relaxed. Neither of them so much as glanced away from their stations until Scott said quietly, "Mr. Sulu, down throttle." Sulu obeyed without hesitation. Chekhov glanced anxiously at Scott, not turning away from his panel. "What's wrong?" The engineer nursed the readings a moment longer. "The sensors picked up a slight flux just off our starboard bow." A smile that wasn't at all amused crossed his broad Highlander's features. "Don't look now, lads, but I think we found a gravitic mine." Sulu groaned. "Lucky for us." "Can we avoid it?" Kirk asked from the passenger compartment. No one seemed surprised that he'd been listening. "We'll find out, Captain," Scott replied. "We're sure as hell not going to try running through it." Chekhov already worried over his controls, leaning back briefly to steal a look at Scott's sensor readout. "I need more room," he told Sulu shortly. "I can't even turn us at this distance." It was serious, Kirk realized then. Sulu could pilot them straight through hell without raising a sweat, but not Chekhov. The security chief's irritability was a certain indicator that Chekhov was not happy with their predicament. "Take us back about 4,000 kilometers, Chekhov continued. "Beyond that, well, at 478 mark." "Mother of Christ!" Scott exclaimed suddenly, his voice sharp with fear. "It's moving! The damn thing's moving! Nose down, Sulu! Get us under it!" "Give me a reading." Chekhov twisted about as far as his seat straps would allow. "Scott, a reading!"
It wasn't until much later that Kirk realized Chekhov wanted the second reading to plot where the mine would be once it passed them. 2 points of reference weren't really enough to extrapolate any kind of course, but he was going to try anyway. Like so much else on this disastrous mission, it was a damn fine effort. The mine struck them broadside, wrenching the tiny shuttle about like a rabbit caught in a dog's jaws. Kirk slammed hard against the wall, gasping with surprise when the strength of the impact forced the wind from him. All the blood in his body seemed to rush him simultaneously into his extremities, swelling them, crowding them. Kirk couldn't tell if the shuttle was under violent acceleration or merely being torn apart by the gravitic mine's fury. He wondered, fleetingly, if the horror stories he'd heard in his youth about runaway centrifuges could hold anything to this. Then Sulu's voice, light and confident. "No, I think I've got it." "Sulu!" Without warning, the engines in the rear compartment fired with a sound like a dragon's roar. A sense of up and down returned abruptly, and Kirk bounced back into his seat so hard his teeth clacked. He'd only just opened his mouth to call for a status report when the suit locker next to the airlock wrenched loose with a squeal of rending metal. Kirk instinctively bolted toward the sagging cabinet. "Jim, don't!" McCoy called. One of the locker doors bulged, threatening to bury the doctor in an avalanche of heavy suiting and equipment. "We don't even know if we're stable!" But Kirk was already up and moving. Though there was no more strain on Kirk's body to rush out in all directions, no blood pounding the backs of his eyes into firework displays of light and dark, still, as soon as he was upright, Kirk knew the ship was tumbling. He thought at first he'd hit a slick patch on the deck, and entertained a brief, vicious thought about whoever kept the decks in order until he realized it was Scott, but knew something more was wrong when what should have been a harmless stumble drove him feet first against the far bulkhead. He felt his right knee groan with stress, then buckle beneath him in a brilliant, nauseating rush of liquid pain. He twisted his body into the fall and met the bulkhead with his shoulder. That only softened the blow a little. A sympathetic explosion from his knee made him gasp. The engines coughed again, this time making a guttural, grinding snarl. The outlines of the shuttle interior softened like velvet, then melted into nothing as blackness swept from stem to stern like a thundercloud. Kirk bit his lip hard and watched pain throb and bloom redly in front of his vision. What he feared most happened an instant later. The shuttle settled into a slow, regular tumble and dropped him from the wall to the deck. He bit his lip harder to keep from crying out, but only half succeeded. The locked door held fast, never losing its hold at all. Kirk almost swore aloud. "Jim!" McCoy's voice, concerned and frightened, came from the doctor's seat. "I'm here, Bones. I'm all right." That was a lie, and Kirk knew his voice said as much. "How stupid, Captain!" McCoy began, but Kirk cut him off. "What happened up front?" "Doctor," Kirk heard someone stumble over the pilot seats on their way toward the door. "Dr. McCoy, are you all right?" It was Chekhov. Kirk could hear McCoy cursing to himself. "Just fine," McCoy growled. "What about you? What happened up here?" "I'm fine, sir," Chekhov reported hastily. "But it's Sulu. He's hurt." "Nobody move." Kirk heard his order stop Chekhov only 2 steps out of the cabin. Beyond the navigator, Sulu moaned softly, and Scott spoke to him in low, soothing tones. "Nobody's going anywhere until we've got lights," Kirk said. "But Jim! Bones, you can't do anything in the dark." Kirk twisted about to look back toward the pilot's hatch, forgetting for the moment that he couldn't see anyway. He allowed himself the luxury of an unseen grimace when his knee sang out in protest to the motion. "Scotty?" "Right here," the engineer answered from near McCoy's seat. "Oh my God, Scotty," McCoy cursed. "You scared me to death." "Sorry, Doctor." "Have we got lamps in the storage cabinet?" Kirk asked, still bent over his throbbing knee. "Aye," Scott said. "About a dozen. But I'll need some extra hands. Come on, lad." This apparently to Chekhov. "I think we're the only 2 still standing."
Kirk sat in tense, painful silence, marveling at how easily he could track their progress in the total darkness. They spoke quietly in the back for a few moments while Scott jimmied open the cabinet. Then a fat finger of light sprayed down the center aisle as the first of the emergency lamps was activated. "Thank God something still works," McCoy muttered. Then the wait began. Chekhov helped Kirk back to his seat, while McCoy tended to Sulu. Kirk tried putting weight on his leg only once, and was forced to apologize when that nearly toppled both him and Chekhov to the deck. Chekhov set about placing lamps throughout the shuttle, while Scott shut down the main engines. They were no longer producing anything but noise. It would never propel the shuttle another meter. McCoy immobilized everything possible on Sulu, using everything he had on hand, then enlisted Scott and Chekhov to help him strap the helmsman into a second-row seat. McCoy would have preferred to lay Sulu out flat, but the only space long enough was the center aisle, and that had to be left clear for repair access. Better that he was secure in a reasonably guarded location. They still didn't know how long they would be out here. Chekhov tried signaling the Enterprise until it became apparent no one could hear him. Even so, he didn't give up until Kirk told him to. Helm responded to prodding, but was useless without information from the navigational computer. Navigations was destroyed. Scott salvaged what he could from the front to start work on restoring their heat and light. Chekhov was left with the radio, an all but hopeless job. Kirk was left to watch McCoy care for Sulu, and to worry. Sulu's valiant action to fire the engines and blast them free of the mine undoubtedly saved the shuttle from immediate destruction. He'd been forced to unbelt to reach the controls, however. While Kirk was thrown against the bulkhead in the passenger's cabin, Sulu suffered a similar fate up front. The result was a shoulder which hung at an agonizingly wrong angle until McCoy eased it back into place. "Torn cartilage," McCoy told Kirk, "severed muscles, damaged nerves, all of it no doubt repairable in a starship sickbay. All of it hopeless in a heatless, lightless, airless shuttlecraft." Kirk watched McCoy wind what seemed like kilometers of translucent bandaging around Sulu's still form, binding his arm fast to his side. "Like a butterfly in a cocoon," Kirk found himself thinking, "or a fly wound up in a spider's web, waiting for the inevitable." He looked around the crippled shuttle now, wondering how long Spock would search before declaring them dead. Sulu's voice interrupted Kirk's reverie. "Do you know what this sort of reminds me of?" "Only a little," the helmsman amended. "But it still reminds me." Kirk hoped it wasn't anything too dreadful. "What?" Sulu smiled weakly, and even though he was ashen, his eyes glittering with pain, the smile brightened his face. "There was a simulation our class ran in command school where a ship had been disabled by a gravitic mine." "Not just your class," Kirk grinned. It was supposed to be kept secret. How else could each class's response be an honest one? But under the circumstances? "All of them." Chekhov groaned inarticulately. "I remember too. The Kobayashi Maru." Sulu tried to nod, winced graphically, and instead said, "That's the one." His smile didn't fade. "What's a Kobayashi Maru?" McCoy asked. "It's a torture device," Chekhov volunteered unhelpfully from the front, and Kirk laughed. McCoy glanced up at the hatch and back at Kirk, looking all the while as if he thought they were trying to pull something over on him. For Kirk, that somehow made it funnier. "It means the ship named Kobayashi in Japanese," Sulu tried to explain. "That was the name of the ship, I mean." "It was a command scenario," Kirk went on, taking pity on the doctor's obvious confusion. "A command cadet is placed in charge of a simulated starship, then forced to make a decision regarding the rescue of a Federation fuel carrier that's been disabled in Klingon space. The name of the carrier in the scenario is Kobayashi Maru." McCoy snorted and sat back in his seat. "So what's the big deal about this test?" "It was a no-win situation," Kirk told him.
No matter what you did or how hard you tried, you always lost. All the possible decisions were wrong. McCoy turned, his face a study in indignant disbelief. Well, that sounds bloody unfair. Everyone in the shuttle, even Sulu, laughed. Kirk said, That was the whole point, Bones. McCoy gave up in frustration and settled back into his seat. I don't understand. Kirk couldn't help feeling sorry for the doctor, who couldn't realize why his bemusement was so funny. It was a character test, Kirk explained, intended to find out how well you respond to losing. McCoy surprised Kirk by laughing aloud. You must have flunked that one royally. The captain feigned insult. On the contrary, I actually scored rather high. Oh? McCoy drew back in mock surprise. I can't wait to hear this. Kirk was startled to discover that, even after all this time, the very thought of his private battle with the simulator made him blush furiously. He resisted the temptation to squirm in his seat. It's a long story, Bones. McCoy's smile only widened. We have lots of time. Besides, he added more reasonably, it'll pass the hours. The hours they had left before rescue or death. That it would. Kirk's inclination to keep his youthful follies hidden warred with the stronger instinct to somehow serve his men, even in this limited capacity. Indeed, if this were not their final wrestle with the Kobayashi Maru, what was? At least it was apropos. I'm not supposed to tell anyone, he said by way of final resistance. Our lips are sealed, Sulu promised solemnly, still smiling. Right, Pavel? Chekhov stuck his head into the passenger compartment briefly. I wouldn't even tell my own mother, sir. I'll hold you both to that, Kirk promised as Chekhov disappeared in the pilot's hatch again. Because if anyone ever tries this stunt again, Starfleet will know where they got the idea.